Hi everybody, welcome back to One Autistic Person. First of all, just need to apologise for the fact that it has taken me nearly a month to get the second video out. Had a little bit of a mental health crisis over the last few weeks, which I'm going to do a video about separately, and about how I've dealt with that in relation to the NHS, and to talk about that in a separate video. So yeah, apologies. I am hoping that I'll now be able to get back to doing what I wanted to do, which was do at least one video each week. This video today is specifically about the next step in the diagnosis process, which is the sort of initial screening questionnaires. So I kind of saw this whole process, this bit of the process, as sort of like a journey through my past, so that I can understand how I'm currently feeling and how that's going to help in the future. It actually was way more than just filling in questionnaires. It allowed me to open up a lot of questions about why I was seeking the diagnosis that I was seeking. Was it the right thing for me? Now, one of the things that I would really say to people is that these questionnaires are available on a website called Embrace Autism. If I remember to, I will link that down in the comments or the description below. So Embrace Autism has all of the questionnaires that I have here, plus some more, apart from the one that's done for your informant, which is a person that speaks on your behalf to your assessors. So all of these are on there. What I really would do is suggest that you, if you are looking to go down the route of diagnosis, that before you go down that route, do these tests online. These they're sort of questionnaires. So if you do that, the reason why I would say do it is because the questions can sometimes come across as a little bit vague and a little bit like there's not much context to them. And I think if you do the assessments, it allows you to put context, your own context, to them, without being under the pressure of the fact that you want to get them to your assessors for you to be able to go through that process. So and it will make it a little less scary when you do it. I did find that they made me question a lot, and sometimes I was having to sort of really think about the answers. Especially with the second one that I'll talk about, which is the empathy quotient, which is the second assessment that I'll talk about. That definitely required me to do a lot of looking at me from a self-awareness perspective, and not just how I feel about something, but how I react and how that may be perceived to other people. So what I'm going to do is just go through them in basically the way that they sort of came to me in the list that I had in the email. So the first one was the autism quotient, which is a 50 question test, and it sort of focuses a lot on autism generally, things around sensory perception, how you perceive your senses. It talks about imagination, repetitive behaviours, focused interests. So kind of the things you would really expect from an autism assessment. That's where they really are asking those questions that are related to sort of autistic traits. I found that one quite easy because I'd done a lot of thinking about it beforehand, and like I say, I'd already done the assessment on Embrace Autism a few times before I did the one that they'd sent through to me, and it was exactly the same. It's a standardised questionnaire from my understanding. And you basically get a score out of 50, and anything over 30, I believe, is considered that you should move forward with. It's highly likely that you need to go for to have the autism assessment, or go further into the autism assessment. So I actually scored 47 on that, I believe. So that extremely high. you have to really think about some of the answers, because they're not necessarily there. That does have quite a few in there where you kind of go, I need more context to that, or try and work, or for instance, there's one where I think it says something along the lines of, would you prefer to go to a museum or a theatre? And it's like, it depends. At different times I felt I would feel differently about that, so I think you go with whatever you feel most likely that most of the time you would want to do. If you really were made to choose, then to do that from that perspective. So yeah, that's the first one. But like I say, if you do the questionnaire first, at least once, I think it will allow you to sort of think about those answers before you go into doing it for real, if that makes sense, for your actual real questionnaire. And then the second one that I did was called an empathy quotient. So that looks at how you empathise with other people, and this was an interesting one. Like I say, I had to reflect not only on how I feel, because I know I feel empathy, but it really made me think about how I react with empathy. And one of the things that I did was have a conversation with with people in my family and people around me. And I had a conversation with the person that I live with, and I was asking about how do I come across with empathy, and he said not very well quite often. He said, I know you do care and that you do have empathy, but sometimes it doesn't come across that way to other people. And he said about my friend. So my friend is also neurodivergent, and his auntie passed away, and he came to stay with us, but not to stay with us because his auntie had passed away, but his auntie did pass away, and then he came to stay with us. I think it was either the weekend after or the weekend after that. And I didn't ask him at all about it, whereas the person I live with did ask. But what I did was I automatically went into sort of doing what he wanted more, which usually it would be shared quite equally, but I spoke more about his interests. We watched TV shows and films that he wanted to watch, so to me that's how I showed empathy, but it might not be apparent that that's how I'm showing empathy. So yeah, it's interesting because you need to really look inwardly at it, and it's not necessarily whether you feel empathy, but how you respond in an empathic way, or an empathising way. So yeah, that one, again, if you do the assessment prior to it, and it asks that prior to it, that'll give you an idea of sort of where you are, and looking at things, and really, like I say, looking inwardly at how that works for you. And then the third one was an SRS, which is the social responsiveness scale. Now this is done by another person, so this is done by somebody who is close to you, who knows you well, that the assessors call an informant, which makes me think of the police, but and that is what I would say with whoever you decide to be your informant, you need to choose somebody who is going to be brutally honest, who is going to say how things are and not be scared of upsetting you by saying how things are. There are some pretty personal questions in there around things like hygiene, around showing empathy. So you need somebody who is definitely going to be completely honest in that and any sort of contact that they have with this person when they're doing the assessment. You need to make sure that it is somebody who is comfortable to be as honest as possible about you, and that you will see the answers to that, because obviously as part of the assessment I got the results of that. So I saw what the person I live with, who was my informant on that one, had said. So it was interesting because I personally felt like I was really conservative on my answers, yet I scored, like I say, 47 on the autism quotient, and on the empathy quotient scored 9, and anything under 30 is considered there's a likelihood of autism there. So yeah, it's like I say, not practice them, that's not the right answer, experience them prior to, so that you know what to expect when you're actually having the assessment and you're not panicked by it, I would say. And like I say, it allows you to consider answers where there's not much context, and allows you to sort of process context prior to things, and allow the person to be brutally honest. The person who's going to be your informant, allow them to be brutally honest about you, and be very clear with them that you want them to be as honest as possible, and that it may hurt your feelings a little bit when you see that that's how people perceive you, but you want that honesty. So the other thing that you have to do is a childhood and development questionnaire, including family background. So it talks about sort of your family background and health information, and then sort of goes through the developmental periods of your life. So you'll need to speak to somebody, probably, unless you know a lot about your childhood, and you're unlikely to know, I think, most of the earlier years stuff. So you're probably going to need somebody either with you or at hand for you to be able to contact to speak to them about some of the stuff that's on there. So it asks you things like when your first word was, when your first phrase was, when you started to walk, when you started to when you started to walk, when you started to crawl, when you started to walk. So it sort of goes through those developmental areas, and then but it also asks you about your mother's pregnancy. So for me, there were complications within my mum's pregnancy. So I was born by cesarean due to an emergency situation that my mum was in at that point. My mum had cysts on her ovaries while she was pregnant with me, and also had chickenpox and gestational diabetes. So it was quite a complex pregnancy and a complex birth, but I was fine when I was born, so there was no damage that was done through the birth. It was, luckily, the emergency cesarean meant that it was done in enough time so that I was born fit and healthy. So then, like I say, it talks about your early childhood, and then it goes a bit further on to sort of when were you, as they put it, when were you dry? So when do you stop wearing nappies, basically, or when do you start going to the toilet yourself? Now, this was interesting because this developmental questionnaire means that you are going to look back at things and you'll start remembering things about your life that maybe you'd forgotten. So it's quite interesting. It can be quite harrowing at times as well when you to think, actually, I forgot those things. So for me, I was dry during the day, quite a relatively average time period, but I'd completely forgotten that I had nocturnal diuresis, which is where you wet the bed, basically. So I wet the bed until I was 10 pretty consistently, and until I was about 13 it was intermittent from 10 till about 13. Now, there's no reason for that at all that anybody could see, other than the fact that when I did sleep, I slept extremely heavily, and would just not know that I needed to go to the toilet. So yeah, that was interesting to remember. Then on top of then you sort of go into school life. So It asks about how school affected you or what happened at school. So I talked about things. So for me, the main areas were social, obviously. There was a lot of social issues. I had very few friends, and the friends I did have, now I look back on and it's like they were like me. But there was only two that weren't enforced on me, because I had friends that sort of, my mum was friends with their parents, and they'd look out for me because I think they felt they had to, but they didn't really want to be around me. The people who did want to be around me were very similar to me. The way we communicated was very similar, so I would definitely put them in the category of neurodivergent now, looking back on it. But one of the big things for me was when I was looking at primary school specifically, was reading. So it was quite interesting to sort of think back to this. I refused to read out loud, and I mean to this day really don't like doing it, but I really point blank refused to read out loud, which led to a lot of problems with my with my teachers understanding my reading age and that type of thing, because they just couldn't work it out, because they hadn't got different measures to do it. I had to read out to do that, and I wouldn't even read out if it was just one other person in the room. So even with just the teacher, I wouldn't read out to them. But I also would only read one type of book, which was Goosebumps books. It was definitely a special interest for me when I was younger. The books were, I enjoyed reading them, but also they had the covers were bubbly, and I used to sit and play with them. They were numbered, so I'd rub the bubbles on them, but they were also numbered, so I could have them neatly in order. They were all different colours, so that was soothing to me. So those books were quite important to me. And I had every single deviation of them as well. So I had the first three books, for instance. Then I bought the three books that were together, so I'd still have all of them. I had to have every single book. But I used to read them very quickly, and my mum knew that I could read, and she would have arguments with my teachers all the time about the fact that I was reading, but I wasn't reading the books they wanted me to. But I was reading a whole Goosebumps book within a few hours at the age of 6 or 7 years old, which, you know, their reading age I think was 8 to 12 was kind of where it was. And even my mum for a while, but didn't really believe that I was reading them. She was like, she didn't think I was reading them, until she read one and then said to me, "Can you tell me about it?" And I literally told her the story from start to finish, as in not word for word, but really clear storyline of the whole thing. And that's when my mum really started arguing with school and saying his reading's fine. They weren't happy because they were Americanized books, so obviously that was a bit of a problem around spelling. It wasn't, because my spelling's fine, but it was to the school. It was a problem, and it seemed to be a real sticking point for them. But eventually, the agreement was eventually that I would read for every 3 times that I read a Goosebumps book, I would read one of the school's books that they wanted me to read. So that was the agreement. I'm not sure I did ever read the book that they wanted me to, and also that I would purposely act out at school, so that because it seemed to be my punishment was to go into another room on my own and do maths, which for me, doing maths was great, and I was on my own, so perfect. But I now, looking back on it, I used to act out so that I would get that punishment. So then it sort of got, there were other things that I remember now that I did that would be seen as strange or abnormal or whatever. It was quite interesting to go back through that, both with my mum talking about things that happened, but also thinking about it myself as well. And then you sort of went into secondary school, and that's where I said where my life kind of receded. I was bullied a lot more. I was bullied in primary school, but I was bullied a lot more in secondary school. I sort of really wanted to keep myself to myself for the first half of secondary school, but then the second half of secondary school, I kind of started copying what other people were doing, where people were being mouthy to teachers and things like that. But I realised as well, I never knew where the line was, and I used to get into trouble a lot more than other people because I would not stop at the point where I should have stopped, which was really interesting to look back on, because I'd never really thought about that. But yeah, that did happen quite a bit, where I just didn't know where that social line was, where when teenagers are pushing boundaries, they seem to know that there is that boundary, and then they can just cross boundary slightly but not cross the full boundary. It's like there's an area of boundary, like a boundary wall that you can stand on, but you can't jump over it. And I used to quite often jump over it and not be aware of why I was the one that was getting into trouble and others weren't. So yeah, that it talks about those things. It talks about your work life. So it asks you about how what you, if you're working, how that looks, what job you do, what your social interactions at work are like, that type of thing. And then it specifically asks you about anything that you want to tell them. So I think it says, what are your concerns at the moment? So in that I did about 20 paragraphs of things, of just everything I could possibly think of, both historically and currently, and how it's affecting my life at this moment in time, why I was seeking the diagnosis that I was seeking, why I felt that I was autistic, and I then sent all that off. And the minute I sent it, I was like, there wasn't enough information. So it's I then sat and thought, I need to give more information, because I don't know how well I'm going to be able to put myself forward during the actual spoken assessment. So what I then did was spend the next week of my life pretty much consistently doing what I have a software that I got when I was at university called Compendium, which is used by the Open University as a way of tracking design projects. I'm going to see whether I can link the software, because it's open source software, and I'm able to share it with you, and it's totally free. And I'm hoping that maybe you are able to access this. I'm not 100% certain you will be able to, so I apologise if not. I am also going to try and edit my map over the top of this video at this point, at some point around now, to show you what this looks like, because I use this, and also my best friend, again, like I say, that is also neurodivergent, he's using it a lot for his projects, and it just allows you a little bit of visualization for things. But what I did was compiled as much information as I possibly could about every different area of my experience. So I broke it down into the traits of autism, and then looked at things historically, as like, how did these things affect me? So these were my repetitive behaviours, these were my special interests, this is how things have affected me socially at different stages. And that was really good for me to be able to break that down, both for when I did do the assessment, but also then to create the 15-page document that I sent before my assessment, which they were great about. I'm really, really pleased that they allowed me to do it. Veritas Assessments Veritas Autism Assessments is the company that I used, and they are absolutely fantastic. And they did allow me to share information outside of the assessment, which I've heard that some people can't, or are told that they're not allowed to, whereas they allowed me to do that, and they allowed me to share that information with them outside of it. So that's what I did. But I would probably suggest if you are going to do something like that, do that before you do all of the assessment type of stuff, and sort of do it I sort of had to push it right down into a week, because that was at the time until I actually had the assessment, which I then realised I didn't need it until the following assessment, which was a week after that. So it was 2 weeks that I still had, 3 weeks in total that I had to be able to do it. But I really pushed to get it to them as quickly as possible. But with Compendium, what you can do is you can go, it's sort of multi-leveled, but you have sort of circles that allow you to show whether you've got a question about something, an idea, whether you can attach documents to it. You can do all sorts of things with it, and I just find it really, really handy as a way of tracking my thoughts. So it's kind of like a thought map kind of thing, but you can put as much information as you want in it. You can make it look exactly the way you are, where you want it, where you are, the way you want it to be. I don't think I said in the other one, the other video that I did, that I'm going to try and not edit videos, because I kind of want it to be that my videos are as real as possible to the experience of being autistic and ADHD, because I don't want to edit out the quirks that come with it, because I think that it just makes it more real, and also being lazy from my perspective as well to not have to edit them. But I hope it makes them feel a little bit more real and a little bit more like I'm sat in your front room monologuing at you, obviously, because there's no response, but I just hope it feels a bit real, a bit more real. The biggest thing throughout all of this that became really apparent to me is that I had been masking for so long, and it really put masking into context for me, and the fact that I mask all the time, and that was really interesting for me, because I realised not only am I masking to the outside world, but I'm masking to myself as well, because I was starting to really look at how things affected me, but also how I would even stop myself from doing certain things or thinking certain ways because it wasn't the right way to be thinking about it. And it was a sort of a start of a process for me of unmasking, which I'm still currently going through, and I think we'll probably be going through for quite some time. And I kind of want to go through that unmasking journey as part of this process, sort of where I am now at the moment and how that's had an effect on me and what's happening, because there are positives and negatives to unmasking. But this is where I really started realising, when I was analysing my past, I was looking at my present, and I was thinking about what I wanted for the future. It's kind of it really was apparent to me that I was masking, and that I was unaware that I was masking, because I think people think that masking is always a purposeful thing that you do, that you think about it, and it can be, don't get me wrong, there are times when I mask. There's times now, especially since I'm now aware of the fact that I was masking, and that I still have to keep myself safe in certain situations. But it was more the fact that how much I'd masked to myself, and when I started allowing myself to do things the way that I wanted to, rather than the way that I thought I should, or thinking in ways that were the way that I truly was thinking, I realised how much masking had not. I was going to say second nature, but it's kind of first nature. It was just there. But it wasn't the way that I truly am, and I'm so much happier now that I am unmasking and that I am being myself a lot more. Like I say, there are difficulties there, and I will go into that into other videos, but I just wanted to say, one, that you need to be aware that this could make you really aware of the fact that you are masking. So, thank you for watching this second video, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. If you could like, comment, subscribe, share, all of those things that are going to make it so that my videos are going to be seen by more people. Like I say, I'm going to try to not edit them, so it's going to be probably a little bit clunky when we're going through it, but like I say, I'd rather do that. So, but also let me know if you'd rather me edit them, and if it's annoying the way that I'm doing things. So hopefully I've been able to get that compendium thing on the screen, and also hopefully being able to link it. I will also put the Veritas assessments and the Embrace Autism websites below as well. Thank you so much, and I will speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye.